I really should be thanking all the people on Patreon for helping hit the goal for this video. But at the same time, that meant this was the first game I ever bought for my PS4, and for that, you can never be forgiven.
The Tony Hawk series has had its ups and downs. Mostly ups. The first slew of games were great, and I still go back and play them now and then. Then there were a number of games on the downhill end of the series, such as Downhill Jam. But even then, the games tended to be average at worst. Things didn't really seem to get bad until Robomoto took over and the board peripheral games came out.
What?! Why is the protection on those so... What?! What?! No! I'm done!
I didn't like those. But there was always that hope that one day, they'd go back to the series' roots and continue on with a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Tony Hawk hinted as much on his Twitter account, and I and numerous other people were legitimately excited about it. Then Activision made it official, saying Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 would release near the end of 2015 and would be developed by... Robomoto.
If at some point that year you heard a random thud sound in the distance, that was the sound of everyone's expectations for this game slamming into the ground.
Robomoto did both Ride and Shred, but after Shred they largely developed mobile games, save for Pro Skater HD and Big League Sports Connect. Next-gen versions would be co-developed by Disruptive Games, who also worked on Pro Skater HD, while last-gen versions were co-developed by Fun Labs, a Romanian group which worked on several Cabela's hunting games. Tony Hawk's appearance at E3 2015 did little to ease people's concerns, as the first bit of gameplay people saw looked like they ported over the Warehouse and School 2 stages from HD, but seemingly forgot several details, or environment pieces, as some areas looked wide open and barren. Ollie physics looked awkward, and the slam mechanic, which we'll get to later, was shown with absolutely no explanation. Even the skaters themselves didn't look so good for a PS3 or 360 game, much less a PS4 or Xbox One game. This despite Tony saying the game was very close to being done.
Well, it looks really cool. So where are you guys at right now in development of it?
Oh, we're very close.
Okay. Coming soon? Do we know
yeah, I mean, you know, they're not saying the official release date, but
okay.
it's definitely this year.
Okay.
Not long after E3, the game's art style for the skaters changed, looking more like some variant of cell shading. Robomoto stated that this change was made so the game would run at a consistently high frame rate, but said it's not cell shading. Quote, "It's just more detailed and vibrant."
Much like how with my videos, they're not poorly lit. They just use shadows and darkness to create a sense of drama and tension.
Going into its release, not only was its marketing push from Activision weak, if we're being kind, but no review copies of the game were given out in advance. Anyone who reviewed it did so by receiving a download code the morning of release day, or in several cases, buying their own copy of it.
If only they'd been able to wait a little bit and avoid paying $60 at launch. Well, at least for the next-gen versions. I got my copy 7 months after the game released, for $15.
At launch, the game was criticized for, among other things, being incredibly glitchy, even after a day one patch which was nearly twice as large as the game itself. That's not saying much, as the initial install was only 4.6 gigabytes. Some of my recordings of this game take up almost as much space as the on-disc content. Activision said the patch was for server support and not necessary to play the full game, though several players said they could only play the tutorial and use the park editor without it. Not the greatest first impression, to say the least. Speaking of, here's what my first impression was like. An image of Tony Hawk looking like he's dying on the inside, and then this. Have I mentioned there are 6 startup graphics and you can't skip any of them? Not even when the Activision and Robomoto logos are going into cardiac arrest? I should also note that before inserting the disc, I unplugged my Ethernet cable from the PS4 and made sure it wasn't connecting via Wi-Fi to see how it ran without any updates. For reference, if you see me playing as Tony Hawk, it's before downloading the updates. If you see a custom skater, it's after downloading the updates. The intro is promising enough, though it does lack the punch of past intro sequences. Each skater just gets one clip spliced over their name graphic. Past intros were longer, showed more of each skater so you understood their style better, and seemed to have more production value. No, I should rephrase that. More production planning behind them. This is what the name graphics look like in the second game. By comparison, 5s just seem kinda lazy.
I know I'm being nitpicky about the intro, but this is a pattern of behavior that continues throughout the rest of the game.
Well, that's what I get for criticizing the intro video. It does lose some of its impact when I see it playing in the background every time I'm at the main menu. The tutorial does a decent job explaining how everything works, though it doesn't mention how to do nollies or fakie ollies, which is tied to L1. It also doesn't mention, for example, the ability to no comply or boneless, or to double tap up or down to do blunt slides. It does, however, show how scatterbrained the game can be. There are 3 different ways to move: up and down on the D-pad and control stick, and using R2 and L2 to start and stop. They also switch the skater's stance sometimes. The L and R triggers slow down and speed up at different rates than the other movement options, with the D-pad and control stick being much stiffer and taking extra time, namely when trying to stop. This can get awkward if you're used to the D-pad or control stick and need to use the triggers to hit certain lines. I'll get more in depth on the controls and mechanics later on, but for now let's check the roster of skaters. The only classic names, as in they appeared in Pro Skaters 1 through 4, are Tony Hawk and Andrew Reynolds, though there are skaters like Nyjah Huston and Chris Cole who appeared in other Tony Hawk titles. It's a solid lineup overall with lots of accomplished skaters. And Riley Hawk.
Okay, I might as well get this out of the way now. I'm okay with Riley being in Pro Skater 5. I mean, by this point, he'd been a sponsored pro for Baker for about 2 years, and looking at his videos, he can do some impressive stuff. Maybe I'm just more likely to cry nepotism for him being in Pro Skater HD when he hadn't even turned pro yet. Or maybe it's just that I realize his first name is Hudson and I just laugh. Yeah, Riley's his middle name. He's Hudson Hawk.
Each pro has their own bio and video you can read and watch from the main menu. I know I mentioned this in the Ride video, but remember when these videos were things you earned by finishing the game? You don't have to do a damn thing to see these. At least in Ride you had to start the game and play for a little bit. There are a few extra characters available immediately. One is not King Graham from the King's Quest games, who's here because... and he's unlocked by winning a King of the Hill match online.
You might have noticed he wasn't unlocked in that video clip. Remember that for later.
Then there's Lil Wayne and 2 characters added with an update, Tyler the Creator and one of the Ninja Turtles, in what on the surface is a bizarre collection of extra characters. And as an aside, Wayne and Tyler don't contribute to the soundtrack. The newer King's Quest series and a Ninja Turtles game were published by Activision, so that's why they're here. And Lil Wayne, well, he actually does skate a little. But he's not a skateboarder.
I skate. I'm not a skateboarder.
I don't know, you figure it out. He hangs out with some pro skaters and has his own private skate park in Miami Beach. This isn't the same skate park as the one on the roof of his mansion. And Tyler the Creator? He skates as well. In an interview, Tony Hawk went so far as to say Tyler the Creator was, quote, "the best skater I've seen who raps," end quote. I wonder how Tyler feels about being in the same game as Lil Wayne.
I really don't know. I really don't like Lil Wayne. Really?
Now the question is, where do the custom skaters go? Each custom skater has to be assigned to one of the pros by selecting them, going to skater attire, then hitting triangle. This locks a custom skater into that pro's move list, stance, and stats, though every pro starts off with a 0 in everything, just like how the other Pro Skater games didn't do this at all because the pros would presumably be good at something. Even as a custom skater in past games, you had a base set of stats to build from. As far as customization goes, you can select a head and a body, then a design for the deck. That's it. You can't even name the character. Compare this to, say, Pro Skater 2, the first in the series to offer Create-A-Skater. It had 3 complexions, 26 heads, 24 torso options with 37 logos, 20 leg options, 22 shoe options, and if you went for shorts, 5 shin choices. And depending on what you chose, you could adjust the color of any caps, shirts, or pants. Pro Skater 5 has 38 choices for heads and 45 choices for bodies. While somewhat large in number, these lump together several prior options and can't be customized in any way, shape, or form. In addition, those numbers are artificially inflated, as several options are just palette swaps of each other, or recycled body parts from the generic and unlockable characters in Tony Hawk Shred. You also have to unlock each piece one by one, starting the game with 4 options for heads and 11 options for bodies, while Pro Skater 2 has its options available from the beginning. Granted, Pro Skater 4 had clothes to buy, but it also had a much larger initial base to choose from. Pro Skater 2 also allows you to name the skater, say what their hometown is, how old they are, how much they weigh, whether their style is street, vert, or all around, and what their stance is. You can even edit their entire move list, assigning tricks to each button input and buying new tricks along the way. Flip tricks, grinds, grabs, lip tricks, and even specials. You can also adjust the truck tension on the board to get stiffer or looser steering. Pro Skater 5 has none of these options. Your move list and stance is set in stone based on which pro you created the character with. You can't assign other moves, you can't name the character or make them unique in any way. They're just the bitch and or bastard clone baby of whatever pro they're assigned to.
Clone baby.
It looks even worse compared to later Pro Skaters, like 3. Here you can add one of 15 faces individually from hats, glasses, hair, and facial hair, all of which can have their color changed, more options for shirts and accessories, tattoos for the arms, legs, chest, and back, more options for legs, socks, and shoes, and that's just for the guys. Pro Skater 3 added female custom characters which have their own laundry list of options available to them. You can also change the character's height and whether they push Mongo all the time, switch, or not at all. And like Pro Skater 2, you can change the move list for flips, grabs, grinds, lip tricks, and specials. That's just for the character though. Aside from choosing the deck design, you can also choose a design for the grip tape and change the color of the wheels, yet more features Pro Skater 5 doesn't have. I won't even go into how bad its creation suite is compared to, say, Underground, which allows for designing your own decks and creating special tricks, but suffice to say, it's a step down.
The only thing 5's customization suite has going for it is that male and female heads and bodies can be used together. I mean, even Tony Hawk Ride's customization, as much as I don't like it, is more versatile than what 5 has. And did I really spend that long just talking about customization? Fuck, this is going to be a long video.
Okay, enough stalling, let's try to play a level and see what happens. While I couldn't connect to an online lobby, I unplugged the Ethernet cable and disabled the wireless, I was able to start a private game on the first level, at least using one of the pros. I could play the second level as well. They loaded pretty fast too, if you ignore that most of the textures don't appear right away. But whenever I tried entering a level with a custom skater, the game would crash. Each level starts off as Free Skate, where you can just wander around doing whatever. This is less in line with Pro Skaters 1 through 3 and more like Pro Skater 4, where you had to talk to various characters to activate missions. In this mode you can look for gaps, which are listed in one of the menus, and do 5 Free Skate objectives: collecting skate, collecting combo, finding the hidden VHS from the old Pro Skater games, finding the hidden DVD, which is recycled from Pro Skater HD.
What, no hidden Blu-ray? Get with the times, Robomoto.
And destroying X number of a certain object, in this case, swag boxes, which explode into confetti. Though sometimes they— Oh God! Tony! Tony, are you okay? Are you okay, Tony? This happens all the time with breakable objects. Pieces get stuck in your back, through your legs, through your board, and some lodge themselves completely around and through your neck. Having these in Free Skate, wherein you have no time limit, makes them absurdly easy and not at all challenging to complete. These aren't objectives so much as chores. It doesn't help that the hidden VHS and DVD, with a couple exceptions, aren't hidden very well or are placed on easy-to-hit lines. The latter is true for some of the skate and combo letters in the later stages as well. Aside from that, each level has 10 regular missions, asking you to perform a task and earn up to 3 stars based on your performance. Wait a minute, 3 stars? This is sounding like the progression system from Shred all over again. Which, to be fair, I liked. You can either skate up to them or select them from the mission menu. But why would you ever skate up to them? The bulk of my free skate time was spent navigating the mission menu, standing perfectly still since you can't move while it's open. Besides, even if you do skate up to one and try to activate it, it brings you to the mission menu anyway, so what's the point? You can only do one mission at a time, as the game has to load a separate instance for you to do each of them. No completing multiple objectives at once here. You get 1 star for the AM score, 2 for a pro score, and 3 for a 6 score. There are many types of missions. High score and combo score are obvious, so let's skip those. And Trick Spot is the same, except you're confined to a small portion of the level, or have to go off a ramp or some other such condition. Besides, you follow the same formula for each of them. Find some quarter or half pipes and... flip, trick, revert, manual, flip, trick, revert, manual, flip, trick, revert, manual, flip, trick, revert, manual. Be sure to red spins and revert, manual, throw some grass and revert, manual, land a whole lot and land in, and manual, flip, trick, revert, manual. The catch is, some of the combo missions tell you to do tricks while, for example, going off a specific ramp, but it will count combos you do anywhere in the level. For some reason, it even counts just doing an ollie, which doesn't give any points, as a combo. Big Head Survival is back from Pro Skater HD, in which you do tricks to prevent your head from swelling up and exploding and try to survive as long as possible. I found this interesting at first, partly because of how the head textures stretched and looked worse than normal as the head grew, but got tired of how your head could explode in the middle of a combo or before landing a string of tricks to reset the percentage. Even worse, it's possible to land a combo, lower the percentage below 100%, and your head still explodes. As a single-player mission, this was just kind of blah.
I should note that's largely how I'm judging Pro Skater 5 as a single-player game. You'll see why when I go online later in the video.
Delivery missions ask you to collect an item scattered around the level and deliver it to a specific area. Collecting items causes your head to swell because, I guess someone really liked Big Head mode and wanted to lump it into another mission type, and a bail causes you to lose whatever you've collected. I never like these missions, in part because it's blatant busy work, and also because when you make a delivery, whatever you collected is supposed to respawn. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, it doesn't, which threw off my attempts at 6 scores several times. Ballbuster missions dump you in a pool or other enclosed area and drop a bunch of balls or vaguely ball-shaped objects in.
Ball.
Which you have to destroy by bumping them up and out of the enclosure. On top of this mission type wasting my time, the balls tend to just bounce off the top of the quarter pipes and back into the enclosure instead of bouncing up and exploding. Usually with the same generic confetti effect as the swag boxes. It's like a party I never wanted to go to in every ball. Sometimes I had balls bounce out of the enclosure and not explode. There were also a couple times when the game spawned too many of these at once and it caused some horrific lag.
And this was after they made the graphical changes so the game would run smoother?
Tony Says is Simon Says, but with skateboard tricks.
Hit a lip trick! Bust a lip trick! Do a lip trick! Don't move your ass!
Getting lots of tricks in a row correct means more points. The tricks are random, so sometimes he won't ask you to do any grinds or lip tricks, meaning you can do this mission without moving. I actually recommend that so you don't accidentally break your streak by habitually doing something else. Sometimes the game tries to trip you up by throwing in tricks said by someone else, which I hated not because I got fooled by it, but you waste time having to wait for it to go away before more tricks appear. And despite the extra time, it still just gives the same amount of points. It's another mission which gets old fast. Then there are the trick multiplier missions. For these, you earn points for time airborne, distance grinding, or distance manualing, depending on the mission, and get more points if you have a high trick multiplier as you're doing it. I actually like these missions, although they are painfully easy to exploit as there's usually a half pipe or a circular ledge or rail to grind near the starting point. I also sort of like the trick limitation missions, where you can't use a certain trick type. No grinds, no manuals, no reverts, etc. What I don't like is how it cordons off massive sections of the level with cones, and if you go past them, or even fly over a corner of them, you teleport and lose whatever combo you had going. Knocking over too many of the cones can also make it difficult to tell where exactly the boundary is. How come the game uses force fields, which are easy to spot and have clear boundaries in the tutorial, and uses cheap-ass cones for the missions?
It's as if you can see the production budget running out as the missions go on.
Wait, no, there are force fields here. I guess they're just for doorways? Still, you gotta have something better than cones. Roadblocks, maybe. A fence, something. Item multiplier missions have you collect items with a high trick multiplier to earn more points. They're supposed to reappear once you end a combo, though some of them appear in slightly different locations or just don't reappear at all. I don't like calling this a new mission type, as it just combines the items from the delivery missions with trick multiplier missions. Coincidentally, I also don't like this mission type. Ring Race has you pass through a series of rings as fast as possible. You have to hit each ring to make the one after it appear, so there's a set path to follow. I want to say this is just meh, but the rings vary wildly for how well they detect your presence. There were times I completely missed a ring and still got credit for it, and times most of my body hit a ring and it said I missed.
Are ya sick of me talking about mission types? Because we're nowhere near done yet. This is the kind of quantity over quality bullshit I expect out of YouTube Let's Players.
Destruction missions ask you to destroy X amount of something arranged in a set path through the level. Also like the rings, the hit detection on some of them can be suspect at best, which brings us to...
Bring the targets!
Doing a flip trick causes fireworks, or dodgeballs, or whatever the game feels like, to shoot forward, and you need to use this ability to break a series of targets, though running into them also works. This was particularly frustrating with the dodgeballs, as sometimes they would bounce when hitting the ground, and sometimes they just disappeared, forcing me to either go back and shoot again, or start over because of the time lost. As weird as this might sound, I completely forgot about these missions until I went back and reviewed the footage for this video. Whether that speaks to how overloaded the game is with mission types, or how unremarkable this one is, I'll leave that up to you. And finally, there are the Hawkman missions. These are a recycled feature from Pro Skater HD, and they are far and away my least favorite mission type. The idea itself is alright. You follow a trail of dots around a level and do certain things to collect them. Green for manuals, yellow for grinds, red for air, not tricks in the air, just being airborne. Blue for wall rides, it's alright in principle. In practice, it's mind-numbingly frustrating. Not just because time ends when your combo ends, not when you collect the last dot, but because like the rings and some destructible objects, sometimes the dots will count for you from several feet away, and sometimes you can do exactly what they're asking for right through the damn things and they won't register, instantly killing your run as you have to collect all of them. Even collecting the dots can screw you over, as sometimes they cover up the whole screen when you pick them up. Very rarely you'll get a relay race, like knocking some balls around and racing to a fountain on School 3, or grabbing lift tickets on the mountain. The rooftop stage has something similar with wrenches and a construction site. It's like they realized the other Pro Skater games had objectives like this, but couldn't think of a more worthwhile way to put it into the game. Those objectives also tended to change the map somehow, opening up more areas to explore, more obstacles to deal with, or more possible lines to hit. These missions don't. They should be the most interesting and enjoyable as they're unique to each location, but they're just boring. They barely deviate from all the other mission types, and as such, blend into the dull slog of the game's initial 80 missions. No, I'm not slurring my words and saying 18, 80, 80, which you painstakingly go through one at a time. You wouldn't think it would be boring given the variety of mission types, but with how similar several mission types are, that's what ends up happening. Not being able to end runs early only makes it take even longer. Believe it or not, Activision and Robomoto, some people don't give a shit about the leaderboards and just want to end the mission once hitting the 6 score threshold. Before you ask, no, there are no competitions in Pro Skater 5, which only serves to make doing mission after mission after mission even more monotonous. Actually, it's more like 120 missions, as getting a 6 score on every mission in a level unlocks 5 harder projectives, another feature recycled from Pro Skater HD.
I'm beginning to think this is actually an enhanced port of Pro Skater HD rather than a legit Pro Skater 5. Recycled extra missions, recycled mission types, recycled game engine, Unreal 3, recycled custom character parts, and as the video goes on, you'll see the recycling doesn't end there.
And if you take into account the 5 individual untimed objectives, that's 140 things to do. Later updates, in addition to things like texture fixes, stability fixes, UI fixes, and adding multiplayer modes, added 2 more stages, and with them, more missions and objectives. So in all, there are 100 regular missions, 50 projective missions, and 50 objectives, so 200 things to do. Because if there's one thing a game with a shit ton of repetitive missions needs, it's more missions. Ordinarily, more content is a good thing, but this is like trying to put out a fire by smothering it with dynamite. Oh, and the last update is smaller than the Day 1 patch, but still larger than the on-disc content. The stars you earn from completing these missions open up later levels. You might not realize it when you unlock them because the notification for it is buried under your last completed mission. Sometimes you'll earn a stat point, which can be added or subtracted at any point from the character menu, so you can adjust your stats according to your needs, which I thought was a nice touch. However, to adjust stats or skaters, you have to exit whatever level you're on, back out to the main menu, then go into the character roster and go to work. Inconvenient to say the least, as the last couple Pro Skater games didn't force you to do this. Free skate objectives also help by giving a little experience, but usually absolutely nothing happens when you do them. Leveling up gives you a card. These cards randomly unlock a part for custom skaters. Usually it's a new deck, but sometimes it unlocks a head or a torso. These cards don't appear often enough to unlock the bulk of the custom pieces, and you likely won't ever see several of them. In part because no matter how difficult a mission is to complete, you just get anywhere from 250 to 325 experience points and dollars for getting the 6 score right away, or 275 for completing projective missions.
You can get less money and experience for doing more difficult missions. And even if you did just get 250 XP and dollars for every mission, you get a whole 25 more for doing the more difficult ones. Well, hot damn! Pack the kids in the minivan, we're getting Dairy Queen tonight!
Or you can get just 25 XP and dollars for failing. Aside from getting cards, leveling up makes you feel important, I guess? I mean, there are a couple of achievements tied to it, but who gives a shit about that? You can use the in-game money to buy new parts, but it takes way too long to save up because parts become ridiculously expensive in a hurry. After playing this game for a little over 20 hours, and completing more than half of the projective missions, I only had enough money to buy 3 or 4 of the least expensive heads, and would have run out of missions to complete for my main character before I could afford any of the most expensive options. I could afford more of the bodies, but again, I wouldn't have been able to buy most of them because they get too expensive too fast. If only there were money I could find in-game in some of the levels. Nah, that's just crazy talk. Why would a Pro Skater game do that? Just forget I even mentioned that. The only option then is to start another character. But given how near completion of the game takes longer than some RPGs, why would I do that to myself? The scores and times for each mission don't have anything resembling a consistent difficulty curve, as on several of them I got 3 stars in 3 tries or less, including several times when I had more than 30 seconds left on the clock and had to just dick around in the level until time ran out. And some of them I got stuck on for a while and only managed to complete by the narrowest of margins. Even after pumping my speed stat up as high as possible and a near flawless run, There were several timed missions I only completed a half second or even 1/100th of a second under the goal time. Meanwhile, there was a egg buster mission where I forgot about 2 eggs and had to go back for them and still cleared the sick time by about 10 seconds.
There's a controller in my hand, so we're talking about controls, I guess. I don't know. I don't have a good segue for this. I just spent over 20 hours of my life playing this game. The mail hasn't come yet. Why is the carpet wet?
The controls are actually alright. Easily one of the best things about Pro Skater 5. Flip tricks, grinds, grabs, and movement are about what you would expect from a Pro Skater game. Control bindings, however, aren't thought out that well, such as having the slam mechanic and grind on the same button, or specials and nollie/fakie ollie stance on the same button. But I'll go more into that later. Gameplay-wise, let's start small. Little details missing from past Pro Skaters, or minor issues that aren't make or break but don't exactly help matters. For example, there's no indication for when you're riding switch stance or normal stance. In the other Pro Skaters, riding switch gave more points for tricks at the price of being less stable. It was even its own stat. Here, not only is there no switch stat, but it doesn't show if you're riding switch because it doesn't affect anything other than whether you nollie or fakie ollie. Instead of accelerating right away when holding ollie and maintaining that speed, your character has to pump a couple of times, then do it again whenever you start to slow down. Not saying this is a bad thing, it's just a departure from how the main games handled it. This happens automatically, but sometimes doesn't happen fast enough, or at all. If you stop on an incline and try to move, you'll always get turned around so you're going downhill. The trick multiplier at the top of the screen doesn't count gaps, but the one at the bottom of the screen does. For the record, the bottom one counts. Then there were the small but more annoying issues which boiled over as the game went on. Wall rides happen automatically when you ollie in their general direction, instead of requiring a button press. This can get annoying when you're trying to hit rails or ledges too close to the walls. Sometimes after landing a string of tricks, your character will celebrate by making some random gesture. Very rarely, you won't be able to speed up or slow down on the D-pad or control stick when this happens. Lip tricks, which are and always have been on the same button as grinds, can be a pain in the ass to try and pull off, as the angle you have to approach ramps at to do them, which was already pretty narrow in the previous games, seems to be even more precise. If I wasn't at a perfect perpendicular angle to the ramp, it tended to read as a grind. This affected some of my combos and, for the Tony Says missions, which do ask you to do specific lip tricks, broke my streak and forced me to start over. Whenever you hit a quarter pipe, you automatically ollie off the end of it, which can waste precious time when you're racing against the clock. Some of those ramps will launch you into the sky with no warning, which is good for doing more tricks, but bad for controlling where you're going. Some ring race missions use these, and it makes aiming for rings more difficult than it should be. Manuals and grinds have been severely dumbed down. It's almost impossible to bail unless you're landing sideways. Leaning too far back on a manual or too far forward on a nose manual? Whatever, that just ends the manual. Overshoot, undershoot, or otherwise miss a rail by a couple of feet? Your board will magnetize to it. This happened in the other games too, but it wasn't nearly this forgiving. Grinding a rail and lose your balance? You just pop off of it, no worse for wear. Not only do you keep your combo, you can even keep it going if you want. 5 is also unbelievably forgiving about landing flip tricks. You can hit the ground halfway through a flip trick and not bail. Instead, the game will just say you landed sloppily and move on. When you do bail, you turn into a ragdoll. Yes, Robomoto reused this too. And have to wait a set amount of time to respawn wherever the game thinks is a good spot. Not only does this look worse than the canned animations from several other Tony Hawk games, in those you could mash buttons to speed up the animation and get moving again faster, which would be helpful considering, every mission has either a time limit or is a race against the clock.
Frankly, 5 is a lot easier because you rarely have to worry about bailing out of a combo. But there are a couple of things that naturally hinder your ability to build them, and one of them is the special meter. For those of you who don't know how scoring works in Tony Hawk games, you do tricks to build up a base score, and then the amount of tricks you do multiplies that score to become the amount of points you earn. So let's say you have a 5-trick combo and all the tricks in that combo are worth 5,000 points, you get 25,000 points for that combo. Keep that in mind for the following.
The special meter, which allows you to perform more complex or goofy tricks worth more points, works differently from the past Pro Skater games. Before, it would activate when full and gradually drain, but fill again when you do more tricks while it's active, and bailing would outright empty the bar. The tricks you could do were tied to a specific input of 2 directional buttons and a trick button, such as left-right grind. You only had 2 or 3 of these, but later Pro Skater titles added the ability to purchase additional specials or earn extra trick slots to expand your move list. In Pro Skater 5, you have to manually activate your specials when the bar is filled with the L1 button. L1 is also tied to switching to nollie or fakie ollie stance, so you'll likely go into special mode trying to do this by old habit or by accident a few times. That's not the only thing you can't do because of special mode though. While active, your entire move list changes to special tricks. Which begs the question, are they really that special if you can just bust out 20 of them in as many seconds? And are they really that special if some of them are just regular tricks from old games or other skaters' default move list? There's also a stat that makes the bar drain slower, so you can spam them even more as the game goes on.
Is it just me, or does this game have its priorities backwards? The things you would expect to unlock, like pro videos, extra special tricks, extra characters, you're just given right away. And then the things you expect to be given right away, like custom character parts, having access to all the missions, or a bunch of useless-ass emblems, you have to unlock. Oh, right. I didn't explain what the emblems are yet.
Some emblems are available right away, mostly the ones that are blatant product placement, but most are earned by accomplishing various things in the game. For every level there are emblems for finding all the gaps, completing all free skate objectives, completing all the missions and projectives with 6 scores, scoring 20 million points total, and mastery, which means doing everything I just mentioned. There were also emblems for doing things like grinding or manualing several thousand meters, bailing hundreds of times, earning 50 million points total across all stages, because this game keeps track of everything you do, every move you make, every step you take. That's why it autosaves so much the graphic for it is like a watermark on this video. It keeps track of your online record, distance grinded, both best and cumulative, manual distance, both best and cumulative, spine transfers done, best combo, tricks performed, specials performed.
Just like, wow, numbers, stats.
And what do these emblems do? They show up next to your name for online player lists. And they're so vague and or random you can't tell what they mean 90% of the time without looking them up. Yay. Oh, wait, I'm getting sidetracked. Back to the special meter. While active, you can't perform any regular tricks. While the regular tricks aren't worth as many points, they're much faster and can build up a trick multiplier faster. So if you want to build up a high trick multiplier, you have to not use the special tricks. For missions like those, the point values are completely useless. Not only that, some of the special tricks are mapped to buttons you wouldn't expect. Maybe it's just me, but I would expect a backflip to be mapped to down and grab, not left and grab. One last annoying thing about the special meter. Pro Skater 5 forces you to fill the bar and land a combo first, then you can activate it. Then when the bar runs out, you're shit out of luck until you finish your combo so you can activate it again later. For high score and combo missions, that means the first combo you do is just filler so you can have the special meter filled and ready to go later on, instead of activating it automatically and being able to use it in the flow of whatever line you're hitting. And about those lines, you might have noticed from the footage so far that I've been doing manuals on the ground and reverts when I land on quarter pipes to keep combos going. These have been in the series since Pro Skater 2 and 3 respectively, but there are several other things from prior Pro Skater titles which weren't included in 5. We'll start from 3 and work up. 3, the game which introduced reverts, also introduced many other things. It was the first game with hidden combos. These could be for flip tricks like kick flips into triple kick flips, or pop shove-its into 540 shove-its by mashing the flip trick button up to 3 times. These could also be done for lip tricks, transitioning between several if you were in a hold, or ollieing out of some tricks to perform others and landing in another lip trick. They could be for grabs, transitioning from one hold to another, and they could also be for grinds, letting your skater do things like lean forward or backward from a 50-50 grind to do nose and 5-0 grinds, and transition from those into blunt slides. Spectators played a role in the game, whether it was hearing them chat with each other, knocking them over, getting knocked over by them, or their incorporation into goals, like impressing a bunch of skaters. Some would even stop and ask you to do some tricks for them, and if you managed to impress them, they gave a bonus to your score.
Just want to see you bust something out. Sweet! I was dope!
My favorite thing about 3 was the inclusion of flat ground tricks, because I'm a Rodney Mullen fan. It was limited in 3, but you could do pivots while manualing, and via specials such as the handstand, you could transition into other moves like Caspers, anti-Caspers, rail stands, and do additional flip tricks specifically for most positions. Pro Skater 5 has almost nothing I just mentioned. You can do double kick flips, not by tapping the flip trick button mid-trick like in 3, but by tapping the directional button twice and then hitting the flip trick button, which is more awkward. You can't go up to 3 because triple kick flips and heel flips are considered special moves. More confusing is that if you do this for a character with a frontside shove it, instead of adding an extra rotation, it does a double impossible, an entirely different trick. As far as people go, unless you're playing online with someone, every level of Pro Skater 5 is a fucking ghost town. Even Pro Skater 2 had vehicles driving by on some stages. The closest thing 5 offers to flat ground is a special manual. Other than that, you can't do anything. Not even pivots. Pro Skater 4 added spine transfers, and expanded the flat ground to include more moves and make it more accessible for each skater, not just the ones with manual specials. It also added skitching, or hanging onto the back of moving vehicles for points and a boost in speed. You could set custom restart points to instantly travel back to any point in a level. Power slides allowed skaters to stop quickly and do a 180-degree turn, which was handy in case you needed to go back for something. And on a soundtrack note, you could go into the menu and choose which songs from the soundtrack played and which ones didn't. In my case, Toy Dolls was permanently turned off, because there are only so many times I can dig that groove before I want to punt a baby. Pro Skater 5 has spine transfers, and that's it. You can't skitch because, again, every map is devoid of life, so no one's driving by anytime soon, and there's no soundtrack management aside from turning the music down. Not even from the main menu at the title screen. Though they did make sure to dump the entire legal agreement there. That doesn't seem suspicious at all.
Can't sue us. Can't sue us.
I won't go on at length about games like Underground or American Wasteland. While 5 does have wall plants, you can't get off your board to do cavemans, execute nada spins, freak out after a bail, or add flips and barrel rolls to tricks. It's not like nothing new gets brought to the table though. Pro Skater 5 introduces the slam mechanic. Pressing triangle causes your character to violently rocket into the ground. It's used for a couple missions to destroy objects, but it's primarily there to drop you onto rails and ledges as it's tied to the same button as grinds. While this should be helpful, think for a moment how grinds typically go in Pro Skater games. More often than not, you want to grind as much of a rail or ledge as possible to get more points, so you'll start near one edge of it, and you need to hit the grind button before landing on it. Doing this in Pro Skater 5 will lead to slamming into the ground in front of the rail or ledge instead of on it. You have to fly over the top of it and then slam down on it, which never felt natural in the time I spent with it. Apparently I'm not the only one, as one of the later updates added an option to have slam tied to double tapping grind. This doesn't completely fix everything about grinds, as in several spots, grinding a rail or ledge will cause the camera to shake violently. I doubt this is intentional, as it only happens on short sections of certain rails and ledges, and doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to why it happens. What? I'm not doing that to my camera. Anyway, when it was unpatched, the game was a mess. When loading into a level, most textures appeared after you gained control. Textures frequently disappeared or flickered on the walls. While I didn't do this myself, it was possible to get stuck in or fall through levels by holding a grab and then slamming into the ground. Several timed missions were incredibly easy to exploit, because if you opened up a menu as you went off a ramp, the clock would stop, but you would keep moving. Even without that, there were times I bailed for absolutely no reason, or slammed into invisible walls.
As I mentioned earlier, the updates did help stabilize Pro Skater 5. But
Things improved after the updates in some ways, but not others. Textures still don't load in completely even after having more time to load, and parts of the stage popping into existence or bad textures still happen on every stage, though usually at a distance instead of within arm's reach. For example, on School 3 or the rooftops, you can see the wave of textures extend out before you. In the underground, if you look up, you can see the lights on the ceiling and walls, among other things, appear as you move through it. I feel like I'm playing a skateboarding version of Okami. Shadows do their own thing for most of the game, frequently shifting around or disappearing for no apparent reason. This looks strange even in indoor stages when light sources would change position, much less on outdoor stages when there's no reason shadows should be shifting around this much. When grinding certain spots, your skater clearly doesn't make physical contact with it, or falls part of the way through it. Even when the grinding animation works properly, hitting a curve frequently shows you aren't actually touching it. The same happens for lip tricks, specifically ones involving hand plants. Even after the patches, I still had occasions where I would slam into nothing. Even worse, there were times my combos ended for no apparent reason, or when I would get partially embedded in a wall. On several bails, my character wound up with limbs, or their skateboard, embedded in a wall or lodged in the floor. And then, well, I can't explain most of this. As far as the soundtrack goes, I can't say it's particularly bad, but it doesn't stand out either. It includes groups like Anti-Flag, Connie Price and the Keystones, Dear Mother, Harlan, Icon for Hire, Rat-a-Tat, The Orwells, The Who.
No, sorry, that was my mistake. The Who are not in this game. That was just my reaction to all but 3 names on the soundtrack. Who?
And the low point, Yogi and Skrillex doing that one song from the Arby's commercials.
Arby's, we have the meats.
Rat Black is also included. They're the band of David Gonzalez, who's in Pro Skater 5, which I guess carries on the tradition started by Chad Muska and Steve Caballero in Pro Skater 4 of pro skaters who make their own music. It also makes him the best musician to be a playable character in Pro Skater 5. I realize music is highly subjective, but nothing about this soundtrack made me want to look it up other than to say for this video who some of the artists were. Usually Pro Skater soundtracks mix in recognizable names with upcoming acts. Compared to Pro Skater 4, we went from having AC/DC, Iron Maiden, De La Soul, Flogging Molly, The Offspring, NWA, System of a Down, Less Than Jake, and Public Enemy, among many others, to this. It neither detracts nor adds to the game. It's largely inoffensive, forgettable background noise. Even the game itself doesn't seem into the music, because the tracks keep skipping at random.
Did they use torrented music files for the game instead of buying legit copies? I'm not making a joke, I'm legitimately curious now.
Other than that, all I can mention sound-wise is that the game includes several sound effects from the old Pro Skater games, namely when finding gaps, getting skate or combo letters, or finishing tutorial stages. As for voiceovers, they're just a bunch of random grunts, and they're fine. Though not having any of these for Bales is odd. You know what, just to sate my curiosity, I gotta go to the credits for a second. Who did the They had Matthew Mercer and Christina V do the voices. McCree and Shantae did the nondescript mouth sounds.
You know what though? Still not the strangest place I've heard Matthew Mercer's voice.
Reload. Shoot target on the left. Great aiming. Round 2.
Pro Skater 5 also offers power-ups, which are certainly things that exist in some levels. There aren't any in-game explanations for what the hell they do or how they work, so you have to figure it out yourself. The winged board on the rooftops lets you double jump by hitting ollie twice. Calling this floaty would be an understatement. Getting anti-grav causes you to launch or ollie much higher than normal, and makes ordinary lines much harder to hit. The shrinker in the Wild West, which is necessary to get to the mine section, makes your skaters small, ridiculously fast, and damn near uncontrollable when you're not moving in a straight line. Then there's the giant power-up, which makes you ridiculously large. Aside from being needed to get to the sewer section of the Mega Park, this mostly just makes it a little harder to see what's in front of you. And lastly, the underground level has a power-up which gives you a speed boost. Some of these are incorporated into the levels and missions, but they feel forced. Like the developers thought the levels needed something more, but couldn't quite decide what it was. And to get rid of the more annoying ones, you have to wait for it to go away, which often takes way too long, or force yourself to bail. As for those levels, I thought the barracks was a solid starting point. It's a good place to get used to the game mechanics and string together some lines. It helps that this is based on a real skate park in Los Angeles, though the big open space in the middle where you can't really do much is a harbinger of things to come. Beyond that is Bonfire Beach, based on a place near Huntington Beach, and with some background references to Venice Beach from Pro Skater 2. It tries opening things up and on certain lines can set your board on fire, which does... well, if it does anything, I didn't notice. It's mostly just there to look cool, even though sometimes the fire trail doesn't show up, and the fire on the board can be best described as jiffy. This is when it becomes apparent how wide open and kind of barren some of the levels are. The ratio of trickable environment pieces to sponsorship plugs rapidly approaches 1-to-1. Past games were loaded with sponsorship ads as well, but it feels more blatant in 5. School 3 is like the school levels in the previous Pro Skater games, namely School 2. But they included a football and a soccer ball you can hit through some goalposts, which don't do anything but explode with the same confetti effect you're likely already tired of seeing. There's also a baseball, which doesn't do anything. Mega Park feels like two separate ideas for levels crammed into one, because there's the surface skate park and then there's a sewer section, but they both feel similar in design. Tons of ramps and quarter pipes in the middle and some rails to grind around the outside. I don't know if I enjoyed the rooftops because I squeezed some fun out of it, or because it reminded me of Twisted Metal. It can be entertaining hitting lines across different buildings, but outside of a couple missions, the wings power-up felt completely unnecessary. This is also a level where, despite the updates which supposedly help performance, the game kept slowing down and speeding up when certain lighting effects were present. On the projective missions in particular, this killed several of my runs. The bunker is... The level is a combination of the warehouse and the hangar, two levels reused from Pro Skater HD and lumped together for this game, with a backroom area leading to the top of the stage. They threw in a missile launching ramp, which somehow doesn't destroy or otherwise change anything, and the helicopter. In Pro Skater 2, grinding the propeller blades would cause the helicopter to take off, opening another small section and crashing through the roof, dropping some debris which could be used as launch ramps. What does it do here? Oh. The asteroid belt is... Wait, hold on, what?
Doesn't this seem like it should be the last stage or some unlockable extra stage instead of a throwaway middle stage? I mean, that's usually when the weird or outlandish levels show up in Pro Skater games. And how come the bunker, which is a combination of the first level from Pro Skater 1 and the first level from Pro Skater 2, is 4th?
The asteroid belt is an okay stage, with a bunch of teleporters that lead to different sides of the map. This is where you can get anti-grav on your board, which makes long distance jumps easier, but makes everything other than long jumps a pain in the ass. This, as well as the giant and shrink power-ups, made the game worse, and I avoided getting them whenever I possibly could. The last level from the core game is the mountain.
Yeah, the asteroid belt should have been last.
The mountain is designed like a straight line, with some areas in between where you can stop and ride some quarter or half pipes. On top of being able to grind the lifts, they can also transport you back to a few starting points further up the mountain. Wait, why are there chairlifts in the middle of the town, and why do some of them start and end about 30 feet apart from each other, with no way to get off except falling out of the chair? This stage is okay, but I often wanted to go back without using the lifts, which was annoying on the steeper hills. There's also a hockey rink with... Wait, what? You're really using fake hockey players? Fake hockey players who can play pinball with my corpse?
Ever see that episode of The Twilight Zone where this guy ends up in an abandoned town and the closest thing he finds to people are a bunch of mannequins? I bring that up for no particular reason.
And there's a puck you can use to score goals, which does absolutely nothing. One last thing. This level has a power-up which turns your manuals into ice manuals. You lean forward and speed up while shooting frosty thrusters out of your hands like Iron Man, who, by the way, is an unlockable character in Tony Hawk's Underground. If this power-up were on a more open stage, I'd hate not being able to control my speed, but on a more linear level like this one, I thought it was okay. Although the sound effect that plays for the ice manual has a tendency to break and continue playing long after you've stopped doing it. That brings us to the 2 stages added via update, starting with the Wild West. This stage feels void of creativity. It's broken down into 3 sections. A pseudo-Alamo-like fortress with some quarter and half pipes and some minecart rails and circles around it. The exterior, which has some quarter and half pipes and some minecart rails and circles around it. And the mine area, which has some quarter and half pipes and some minecart rails and circles around it, but also has rails going through the middle and in the ceiling. This stage has graphical problems out the ass, namely with black empty squares appearing where textures should be. This actually happened in a couple other levels too, but it happened way more often in the Wild West. And finally, we've reached the second free DLC stage, the Underground. I get the feeling this and the Wild West levels weren't tested for very long before being released, because both have quite a few of the recurring problems, and a couple extra on top of those. For example, when I exit from this menu, why does the complexity meter from the park editor show up in the upper right corner? And why are the panes of glass spontaneously unbreakable? This level is a subway, and is designed like a straight line with a couple side areas. When you reach the end of it, you get warped back to the beginning, but you can't warp from the beginning to the end. Pro Skater fans might think the beginning of this stage and the end level warp seem familiar, and that's because parts of this stage are recycled bits of the mall from Pro Skater and Pro Skater HD. The start of the level in particular has almost exactly the same layout.
And that's all the levels, so what happens when you complete the game? Or complete certain parts of the game? Because past Pro Skater games were big on rewarding players who went the extra mile.
Aside from an extra hidden stage or two, or videos for each pro, There were the Bales videos of the Neversoft staff trying to skate, and random goofy shit like the developers holding a contest to see who could land a kickflip first. I hope that someday I can serenade someone with Happy Birthday the way the Neversoft staff did.
And let's not forget all the extra characters you could unlock. Spider-Man, the Demoness, Wolverine, Ollie the Magic Bum, Officer Dick, just to name a few. Or the laundry list of cheats you could unlock. Anyone can grind in circles, but can you grind in circles in first-person mode?
So, if you unlock all of the levels, nothing happens. Okay, fair enough. What about finding all the gaps? And by the way, doing a specific special trick at a random quarter pipe should not be a gap, especially not when it's a special trick the game doesn't tell you the input for. Anyway, if you find all the gaps in the game, nothing happens. Fine, whatever. That's how you would get Private Carrera in the other games, but not here, I guess. But if you complete all the objectives, nothing happens. Okay, but if you complete all the missions on the AM score, nothing happens. Pro score? Nothing happens. Alright, every mission done with a 6 score, 3 stars across the board. Nothing happens. Max out all of your stats by doing several projective missions on top of the regular ones? Nothing happens. Alright, how about completing every projective mission?
No! No, that's where I draw the line. And besides, I assume you already caught on to the pattern, but nothing happens. You just get to sit on your pile of useless emblems because most of them don't even count for the slightly less useless trophies or achievements. Alright, fine. You want me to go online for your always online game? Let's see what the shattered remains of the Pro Skater community has to offer. Unless you're on the last gen version, because they don't have online.
Obviously, I needed PlayStation Plus to do this. I can't believe this game is what got me to use my free trial period. Each level has its own leaderboard, as does each mission. Every level is its own little space online, so you have to keep disconnecting, going back to the main menu, and reconnecting if you want to switch between them. Load times are slower, obviously, because you have to connect to a server, but not egregiously slow. Then again, when I was offline, there were no load times going into missions or back to the Freeskate hub, so any load time would be slow by comparison. The exception to that is if you're entering a level no one is playing, which takes much longer. Usually this happens with the later levels, because from the beginning, the only level a person can access is the barracks. You can see how the global play count is much lower in the later stages than the early ones. Only the most dedicated people stuck it out to play the later stages, so good luck finding more than 1 or 2 people in those, if you even manage that much. Most of the time, I had to start my own match for Bonfire Beach, the second level in the game. That said, there are still people playing this game. At a couple points, I wound up in rooms of 8 or 9 people on the barracks, which sounds impressive, until I mentioned the rooms were designed to hold up to 20 people. Credit where it's due though, the game's community is still clinging to life. You can skate around and hit people, which doesn't do anything besides display a little message, or try to start up either a multiplayer match or a co-op mission with other skaters. Before you ask, no, graffiti mode is not one of them. When you do this, a separate instance of the level loads with just those players in it. The catch is, roughly half of the regular missions in Pro Skater 5 are single player only, and all projective missions are single player only. Yes, the game forces you to be online, so you can spend more than half of it playing alone.
I think it was John Ray who once said, "Misery loves company." Now, if only that company would do anything.
I spent about 4 hours playing online with other people, specifically trying to start up multiplayer matches, at least when I managed to find more than one other person in a level. Quick Match, Trick Attack, Deathmatch, Manual Mayhem, King of the Hill, I tried all of them. No one would join. Part of this could be players being apathetic about playing with randoms, but it's also because, like I said, you're forced to be online to play single-player stuff. So spots in a room end up populated by users who never intended to play with anyone. Which means I never unlocked King Graham, because I couldn't get a King of the Hill match started, much less win one. The only time someone played online with me was when I picked a co-op mission I already had a 6 score for.
Alright, I'll make my own park. And you're not invited. Except, I uploaded it online, so technically everyone's invited. But you really shouldn't go. I mean, even I don't visit my park.
The park editor uses 5 level templates with 3 different sizes. It has a decent amount of pieces to work with, and you can make some ridiculous shit with it. But it's limited by a complexity meter, so you can only add so many things to a map. You can also add objectives to a custom map, like skate, combo, a VHS, and a DVD. However, despite the game's updates, custom parks tend to have flickering or disappearing textures, or flickering or disappearing shadows. In fact, shadows will sometimes just disappear for long stretches of time. Or I don't even know what that was. Shadows should be a minor problem, but it's distracting when they look so glitchy. I think the reality of the skate park is about to collapse in on itself. At one point the wall itself got really obscene and was censored by a black bar. Impressive, considering this particular park is in a relatively small space. And whether it's the community, a busted rating system, or the park editor itself, most players don't like anything that gets uploaded. The most liked section only has 3 parks with more likes than dislikes. Beyond that, and the newest and favorite sections, parks can be given tags like challenging, simple, fun, street, wacky, among others. But every category shows the exact same list of parks. So those selectable tags after leaving each park clearly aren't working. And like the main game, exiting a custom park throws you back to the main menu. Oh, and you can play online with these too, but if I had trouble finding people online beyond the first level of the game, what do you think the odds are of finding someone playing in a random custom park? Just for the hell of it, I made a small level with a bunch of rails and planters floating in the sky, except for one leading into a wall, and then I uploaded it. Let's see how bad the rainy What?! How does this have more likes than dislikes?
Clearly I don't understand what Pro Skater 5 players look for in a skate park. Much like how Robomoto didn't understand what made the Pro Skater game so great. But are they completely to blame?
In short, no they aren't. A few days after the game's release, indie developer and rotating limousine enthusiast Dan Teasdale brought attention to a press release from Activision made in July of 2002, proclaiming they had a 13-year contract to produce games under the Tony Hawk license. For those who don't feel like doing the math, that license ran through 2015. Robomoto was likely given a short development timeline, which forced them to cut corners to get the game out before the contract expired. Ultimately, Robomoto shoulders some of the blame for how the game turned out, but don't forget to have Activision share the load. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 is a game that had a lot to live up to. Case in point, Pro Skater 2 and 3 are in the top 15 of Metacritic's highest rated games in the site's history, with 2 being tied for second. 5, however, comes off as the dad who tries to be cool by imitating what his teenage kids like. It hits some of the same notes as the rest of the series, but it does so in such a half-assed or half-hearted way that it's hard to believe former Neversoft employees were consulted to make sure it had the same feel of the prior entries. Though maybe they just asked what levels were in the older games so they could reference them in one of the DLC stages. So many things in the game were recycled assets or recycled ideas. Even the pre-order bonus, which is now $4 DLC, consists of a few deck designs and an 80s Tony Hawk skin, which is an unlockable from Pro Skater 2. While the patch has helped, Pro Skater 5's problems go far beyond simply fixing a few lines of code, because bug hunting doesn't fix poor design. All it did was take a bad game and turn it into a below-average game. An improvement, yes, but I still can't recommend it.
If anyone out there is holding out hope for some kind of update to fix the problems that are remaining, or more free DLC, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Robomoto shut down in August of 2016, so probably not going to happen. But if there is one silver lining to this, I can confidently say that Pro Skater 5, while my least favorite of the Pro Skater games, is not the worst Tony Hawk game out there. Tony Hawk Ride still gets that honor. Although I don't have first-hand experience with that Tony Hawk Motion game for the DS, so... Wait a minute. First-hand experience...
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
So you have the game, but you don't have the motion pack, which you need to play the game. How much is the game? Hi, I'm calling to ask if you have Tony Hawk's Motion for the DS. You have the motion pack, but you don't have... Wait, how did you end up with only the motion pack? I think I know someone you should get in touch with. Okay, eBay, let's try you. Tony Hawk's Motion DS. Huh, that's not too expensive. Whoa, shipping's how much? You know what? I can think of a better way to spend my money.
Just want to say thanks to Embassy Skate Shop for getting me some new trucks, Thunder brand trucks for my skateboard. Or should I say, Thunder trucks?
When I say I'm going to the park, I mean I'm going to the park.
So, what do you think about just riding a skateboard through the park? And tracking a distance in Pokemon Go a little bit easier. Working on a 10K egg right now.